He says, we're thinking more like Darwinists than engineers if we don't take this position. And Darwin hijacked the iterative engineering process and engineered biology better for theology and better for science. And so that's the direction that ICR has gone under Dr. Guliuzza's leadership. It's really a profound addition to the creationist movement to have this perspective voiced by Dr. Guliuzza. I think it's the coming argument that will be used most of the time in future creationist ministries. But we appreciate him so much, and we're going to enjoy what he has to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. I know everybody your bladder might be getting full or something like that, so I will make this quicker today. What I'm going to do with today's talk, I'm going to split it into two parts. I will do half today, and I'll do half tomorrow. Sound good? Sound like a fair deal? Is that good? Get extra kudos for splitting half and half on that. So tomorrow we were going to talk about new developments in human reproduction. I will save that for a future trip to Shasta. I forgot where I was. Almost said Dallas for a second on that. So does that sound pretty good? Sound like fair deal? We'll do that half today and half tomorrow. So biological adaptation, as you see in your notes, purposeful or random. Purposeful or random. We're going to cover the random part this morning. Tomorrow morning, I believe at 9:15, I'll cover the purposeful part, and it'll be a way to think about things. The main thing, what this talk is really about, is this. Engineered biology, as Dr. Nicholas was mentioning here, it's a new way of thinking about biology. And we should have been thinking about this for a long time, creationists. I mean, how many of you believe that organisms and human beings were engineered? We all do. We all believe this. This is the basis of general revelation. Biological engineering is what everybody sees, and they intuitively sense. This was really engineered. Birds were engineered to fly. Fish were engineered to be in the water. Everybody intuitively sees this. There are other areas of general revelation, but by and large, biology is what really indicates that there was a supernatural creator. I'm going to move this up just a tad bit, right under here. Better, Dr. Gunn? Good on that. Now, most of you are already aware that we have a free monthly magazine, and probably every one of you already gets it, but just on the outside chance that nobody has it, it's out there, and you can sign up for it. It's been free for over 50 years, and we have donors that make sure that we can give it away free to everybody who would like to have this magazine. I myself don't really follow these things that much, but some of the younger people do, and you can follow us, and we have podcasts, and we have programs on all of these. We don't do anything on Twitter anymore, that my slide is out of date, so I exit out, and by and large, you can follow it on that now. You know, that's easy enough. Just X out Twitter and you're on X. And so you can follow us on that as well. And you'll be able to hang along with what we're doing. We only have 2 books of this left out there. This will cover the majority of things in my 2 talks. It's the most up-to-date thing we have on the table. And I have 2 chapters in this book right here, because everybody asks me, where can I get some of this information? I have several chapters in this book which covers this information, and then the previous one is the most recent information that has this. So between these 2 books, we should all have it. Now here's a new thought that most people don't recognize. Darwin changed the way people think about God. Of course, he made it so people could be an intellectually fulfilled atheist by their thinking. But he never came out and he never directly attacks God. You can search his writings. He led a lot of people towards atheism, but he never came out and advocated for atheism. He changed the way people think about God by this. I don't know why creationists have been saying this for a long time. He changed the way people think about his creatures. They changed the way people thought about his handiwork, what he did. And when you change the way people think about that, you're changing the way they think about the one who put it all together. So, first of all, he said that creatures were a natural product. They're a product of a completely natural process. On top of that, he said they're not even really, really cool. They're not really highly engineered at all. And his whole theory basically argues that they're cobbled together. They're patchwork. They're just put together willy-nilly. They're not put together top down as if someone was thinking to build this. They're put together from the bottom up. So they're cobbled together by some mindless tinkerer. And we know that they're cobbled together because they have leftover useless parts that are vestigial. And some people even argue they have poorly designed parts and things that just don't reflect the handiwork of a creator, the God that everybody's thinking about. So they got broken stuff, they've got leftover stuff, they're completely cobbled together, they're a work in progress, they're never done, they're never finished, they're just constantly going on and on and on and on. So they're a work in progress on all of that. And on top of all of that, he said they came about due to deadly struggles to survive. Now think about that. What kind of God would lead to the development of life through deadly struggles to survive? What you think is the handiwork of a all-powerful, intelligent, loving God, someone who loves us and has humans as the pinnacle of his creation? You think that? Wrong. Everything you see, every feature on every creature is an adaptation that enables them to survive at the expense of something else, the extinction of something else in this dog-eat-dog, struggle-to-survive world. It's really just the outworking of every individual's selfish need to live. So what kind of God does that? So, I mean, have you read these things? Of course, you've all read this. When you believe this about the creatures, then you've changed your view about the Creator. You've radically changed it. You went through the back door. And then until you change this, you can't change the other. So ICR's mission is to change the way people think about God. By doing what? Changing the way we think about his creatures. His creatures. So this is what ICR's almost mantle, as Dan Biddle called it. You've got this mantle from the Lord to do these things, to change the way people think about the creatures by first of all showing that they really are an engineered product. And the way to do that is you get people to think about biology from an engineering perspective. It's easy to do that. You're an engineered product. You're not a natural product. You're an engineered product. You're not cobbled together by some mindless tinkerer called nature. You're really the work of incredible craftsmanship. That's actually easy to show. That's easy to show. You know, if I would have done the talk on reproduction tomorrow, it's that you can just show incredible craftsmanship through all of that. Not only that, you have a lot of purposeful systems, and everywhere I look in biology, I'm seeing purpose. We'll cover that in part 2 of tomorrow's lecture. We see purpose everywhere, not this random stuff. On top of that, you're not a work in progress. You're a finished work. Birds are finished. Fish are finished. We all can adapt. We can all change to different things, but you're done. You're finished. Your car out there is a finished work. Even if it has a cruise control on it, which lets it to adapt to things, it's a finished work. If it was made in Japan, it's really good on that. It's a really good finished work on there. If it's made in U.S., check your lug nuts. They may be loose on that when you get your car. But even the U.S., the UAW product is still a finished work. It's still a finished work. And on top of that, organisms fit into incredible ecosystems that you work together with other creatures. And you work together in incredibly good ways. It's not this survival of the fittest mentality. And here's something I'm thinking we're going to develop with ICR. It's a new thought. I don't think any creature, nobody's brought this out, can operate independently from other creatures. In other words, all creatures need at least one. I don't think it's one. All creatures need other creatures in order to live. They're making stuff that we need. We're making stuff that they need. And they all work together on that. We're an autonomous being. I'm autonomous. You're autonomous. But I function in connection with other creatures as well. And I think that's the Lord, how he made that. And that shows a level of engineering which is above and beyond an individual creature. As incredible as that is, the fact that I work together so neatly and so perfectly with other creatures, it indicates the thinking of somebody who knew about all of the creatures and how all of the creatures work. And he put them together so that they all work together. Wow. That's just another level of omniscience that just goes beyond. I got my little country church official water thing from last night, so I'm using it today because when you put anything in this, it becomes holy water. That's what I was told. All right. So in order to change the way people think, you have to get rid of the errors. And step one, you need to recognize the error and you need to replace it with correct thinking. So today's message, it splits easily, so we can do it. We need to recognize the error and replace it with correct thinking. So one of the major errors right off the bat is Darwin's greatest discovery, according to Francis Ayala in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. He says this, that Darwin's greatest discovery was, boom, natural selection. Darwin's greatest discovery, natural selection, the origin of adaptations of organisms were brought into the realm of science. The adaptive features of organisms could now be explained like the phenomenon of the inanimate world as a result of natural processes without recourse to an intelligent designer. Now, this is interesting. This is in not a theological magazine. This not one on metaphysics. This is a science journal, one of the leading science journals in the United States of America, and yet scientists have a worldview, and their worldview is materialism, and they're advancing that worldview, and this is how they're advancing it. They advance it through their science journals. And so Darwin's greatest discovery was to come up with, ostensibly, a totally natural process that could explain why I look so engineered without recourse to an engineer. And how does he do it? He does it by reintroducing a mystical agent. And if you read this paragraph, you'll see the agency in there. Darwin's theory of natural selection accounts for the design of organisms. That's what it's meant to do. Why do we look engineered? And for the wondrous diversity as a result of natural processes. And here it is. The gradual accumulation of spontaneously arisen variations, that is, genetic mutations, sorted out by natural selection. Does everybody see the magical agency that has been put right back in? That's why it's tough. It's there, but you have to look. There's an agency. You get all of these random mutations. They're out there, and you need to get a brain back into it. What words in his paragraph there put the brain back in? Sort it out. There it is. It slips in. It slips in. Can you sort out? Of course. Everything with intelligence sorts out. My wife had to give our little pug a pill. And so she would hide it in the pug's food. And there, and after everything was eaten, guess what was left in the bottom of the bowl? Food was gone and the pill was left on that. Even the pug can what? Sort out. They sort out because she's got a brain. She's got a brain. But nature doesn't have a brain. And here it is. And you know how many of the smartest people on the planet don't even catch this? Most of them. But it's God's agency out, a substitute agent right in. And my challenge to you for the rest of your life is every time you see the phrase natural selection, look within 2 to 3 words, there will always be a verb. There will always be a verb. Natural selection sorts. Natural selection acts on. Natural selection favors. Natural selection worked on. Natural selection sees or can't see. It'll always be there because this is the substitute agent, and agents can govern verbs. So there it is. And he goes on to say this. This one's Darwin's fundamental discovery. There's a process that is creative, though not conscious. I mean, that's just ludicrous. But the smartest people on the planet believe this, that there's a creative process that is completely unconscious and totally natural. So they have the substitute agent in. Number 2, everything in their worldview is random, because random is the opposite of purposeful. So they bring in this random. So this is just a typical quote that you'll find in any typical evolutionary literature. A classical, this says, Darwinian system embodies a basic principle: purposeless genetic variation. In other words, the genes are changed without any purpose at all. And I'm going to show you this is completely wrong. But that's what they say. Of reproductive individuals united by common descent coupled with natural selection of, there it is. The verb is the selection, natural selection of those rare individuals that what? Fortuitously express the traits. It's a process replete with chance. So this is how you change the view of God. He's not a purposeful, thoughtful being. He does everything replete with what? Chance, random, purposeless. So 3 major things that Darwin brings into people's thinking is that adaptation and biological operations are purposeless. Number 2, he's going to personify nature to act as if it is God. It's going to be everywhere, all the time, looking over every variation and invariably picking, selecting the best ones. It's this all-seeing, all-present, powerful being. And then number 3, it's creatures are going to become passive. Creatures are not active. They're not highly engineered. We're not active problem solvers. We're modeling clay that gets shaped by nature, molding us. Oh, poor gals can't see the slides. Am I blocking your view on that? All right, that's what it is. So recognizing the error, random genetic mistakes as fueling adaptation. This is really old. Whoever's thinking this is 20 years out of date, and yet it's being taught in school. Let me just give you some examples. Oh, trends in plant science, 2022. Look at this guy. Look at the title of his paper. Whoever thought genetic mutations were random? You know who did? He did. He thought that they were random. All evolutionists thought that they were random. There's a phrase that's called walking it back, when you've said something wrong. And so now that research is showing that these genetic changes, particularly the ones that are adaptive, are not random, then boom, you get these headlines. Whoever thought that they were random? Well, you thought that they were random. But it's the data that's driving it. In 2017, there was a conference in Lisbon, Portugal, on the nature of variation, random directed or biased or directed. Why was variation characterized as random in the first place? That's interesting. And what would be the case if either mutational or developmental biases were to impinge on the evolutionary process? You know why it was characterized as random in the first place? You can answer this now. Because if genetic change in the first place was thought of to be purposeful and directed and going somewhere on purpose, then it would not have sounded so purposeless and anti-theistic. In fact, it would have sounded like it was engineered. So why was it characterized in the first place? Boom, to get purpose out. It had a metaphysical reason for it. Oh, September 2025, mutations driving evolution are informed by the genome, not random, study suggests. I mean, all you have to do is just read the paper. The titles say it all. They're informed by the genome on that. Public Library of Science on genetics, 2019. What is mutation on that? This is what they say. We argue that regulated mutagenesis mechanisms greatly increase the probability that the useful mutations will occur at the right time. Timing? Regulated? And thus increasing an organism's ability to evolve and possibly in the right places. How about this? Let me translate. What we're recently finding is genetic changes, not mutations, occur at the right time in the right place, and they enable organisms to adapt. That's what he's saying. He can't come out and say that, but that's what that's saying. Assumptions about the constant, gradual, clock-like, and environmentally blind nature of mutation are ready for retirement. Let's put them in the nursing home. That's where they need to be. And so if you just stay current on the literature, you'll see that these changes are directed. They're not random. So this was worth the price of admission, just to see these headlines. Now you can tell your friends. You can say, I'm current on the literature on genetics because I went to Alpha Omega Conference. And there, someone showed me 5 papers within the last 10 years or less, which shows that genetic changes appear to be what? What's the word? Purposeful. Purposeful and not random. Did you know that? And your friend will say, no, I watched Nova last night and they said they were random on that. And you'll say, well, Nova's wrong. And you can point this out so you're better equipped. You're better equipped. Number 2, recognize how inserting mystical selective narratives taints the research. Taints the research. Now, everybody likes to think of using selection makes you sound intellectual. Wrong. It's tainting the research in every way. For instance, these are some of the evolutionary phrases that you're going to see, but are not really real. They only exist in someone's mind, but not in reality. First of all, there are no observable selection events by nature. Even though they'll say nature selected for, nature selected against. Nature does not have a brain, and so you cannot go out there and actually observe nature select anything, even though they say it. And in their mind, they believe it. But I'm saying if you go out there and you just try to take a picture of it, you can't, because it's not really happening. On top of that, there are no identifiable units of selection. Now, what do they mean by that? So suppose something is selected for in their view, there must be some trait, or there must be something about the creature that was selected for. That's called the unit of selection. I mean, were they selecting for your height? Were they selecting for your good looks? I can tell that they were. Were they selecting for your brains? Were they selecting for, what were they selecting for? Were they selecting for you? Were they selecting for your sperm? Were they selecting for your genes? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody can identify these units of selection. Nobody can identify the levels of selection. Were they selecting for you? Were they selecting for your offspring? Were they selecting for the population? Were they selecting for the group? Were they selecting for a process? Nobody can tell you what the levels of selection are. These are not there. Nobody can tell you what the selective advantages are. Did we select just for your good looks or for your brains? Or both? That was your tee up. That was your chance to say for both on that. Nobody can tell what the selective advantages are. I'll give you another one in a few minutes here. Nobody has quantified strong positive or strong negative selection. Nobody's able to measure selection pressures. These are things that supposedly work on the creatures and they pressure them. Nobody's been able to measure those. They can't even tell me what the units are on all of this. Nature doesn't have a brain to justify even using the word selection for it in all of this. This is a whole cottage industry of verbiage that gets used, but none of it's real. You can't quantify any of this. Isn't this amazing? It's like having a magical, mystical story, which everyone repeats and they all operate on, but it's not really real. It just exists in someone's mind on all of that. Selectionism, therefore, is a fundamentally misleading because you shouldn't even be using the word selection. It's a misnomer. It's mystical. You can't measure any of these things, and they only exist in someone's mind. That's why it's a mental construct. It's not really real. So we have an unseen adversary, which has constructed a whole way for the scientific community to think about biology and how it's happening, and they function like this, but you can't really lay hands on any of it. Isn't that amazing? That's quite remarkable how you can delude so many people in this. So we need to get rid of that. This gentleman here, he's passed away now, Robert Reed. He was a Canadian biologist. He was a major theorist up in Canada. This book, Biological Emergences, he's an evolutionist without a doubt. Indeed, the language of neo-Darwinism is so careless that the word divine plan can be substituted for selection pressure in any popular work in the biological literature without the slightest disruption in the logical flow of the argument. Instead of saying there was a divine plan, they say, oh, these selective pressures did it. He recognizes the mysticism on it. This man, he's also an evolutionist, Stephen Talbot. Evolutionary biologists routinely speak of natural selection as if it were an agent. An agent. Natural selection becomes rather like an occult power of the pre-scientific age. It's everywhere, doing everything, taking creatures from simple to complex and making them all diverse. Everything is there. Every feature on your body, your hair, your eyes, all the cells, every part of your cells, every part of it is due to natural selection. What a pervasive power on all of that. Within 10 years of Darwin publishing his book in 1859, he's already, by that time, he was getting pushback from thoughtful people who lived back then. They're saying, this term selection, you're using it like it's a god. Literally, they were saying that. You seem to be deifying nature. And he wrote to a friend, the term natural selection in some respects is a bad one. No duh. As it seems to imply conscious choice. Well, no, and he knew it did. You're applying selective abilities to nature, and you didn't do it by accident. He did it on purpose. So it does seem to imply conscious choice because, Darwin, you intended it to imply conscious choice on there. But this will be disregarded after a little familiarity. Wrong, oh, it didn't. It got hardened. And as I just showed you, all the verbiage that has sprung up on that, it didn't get disregarded. It got it completely incorporated in everything. He says, I also have often personified the word nature, for I have found it difficult to avoid this ambiguity. Of course he does. You know why? Because creatures look like they were created. So you're going to explain the origin of all of these things without some force? So you will personify natural selection, and you will tend to personify, therefore, nature. And that's what comes into your explanations. And this is what makes it bad for science. When you read scientific papers, and I know you don't read a lot of them, but I read a lot of them, I will read something like this. This exists in the word because of natural selection. It gets used as a causative force in their papers. That's why it's misleading to science. All right, Bing, that's out. Recognize the problem of their view that nature is active and creatures are passive. Natures are active and creatures are passive in their worldview. Let's look at a couple headlines. You might get a picture, you might get an article like this. How insect herbivores drive the evolution of plants. So you have herbivores. Those are insects which eats plants. They eat plants on this. And so what they're saying is, it's these insect-eating plants which are driving the evolution of plants to try to evade and come up with defenses against these plant-eating insects. It's the insects which are driving them. And you will see that word a lot, drive, force. And other times they'll use the word pressure. It's a pressure. So in this case, the insects are the selective pressure which are driving the evolution of plants. And this is how they view everything. I would say, look at it the exact opposite. Plants are driving themselves. Plants can drive themselves to respond with capabilities which are engineered up front to respond to these insects. They don't see it that way. They see it the exact opposite. Here's another one. Geology and climate drive diversification. So in their view, it's always the environment which is driving the change. I have 12 of these. I cut out a bunch, but just have a few. Evolution. This is from Nature, world's leading scientific. Geology and climate drive diversification. Again, if you turn to a leading textbook that is used in colleges these days, Chapter 1, the environment. Oh, this is even better. The environment is a what? It's an agent. It's a normal agent producing phenotypes. Phenotypes are your traits, the different types of traits. So all of this is to get most people, and most evolutionists don't even recognize that they're coming from this perspective, an externalist perspective, that it's nature which is driving everything. But it's totally wrong, and we just need to see how they have it in their literature. On top of that, they'll say heat overrides genes to make bearded dragon embryos change sex. Heat overrides the genes. On that. This holy water's reviving on there to change sex. How's that happen? It's not just bearded dragons, it's alligators, it's turtles, it's lots of these reptiles. So you might have a turtle which was laid with the genes which would have made it naturally to develop into a male turtle. Was I talking about turtles? Okay, a male turtle on that. But the female turtle lays the eggs in the sand. What happens is these eggs will incubate in the sand at different temperatures. Maybe it's a warm summer and the sand is hotter and they incubate at a higher temperature. Or maybe it's a cool summer and they incubate at a cooler temperature. When they incubate at higher temperatures, instead of developing into a male, I don't know exactly what this is, they'll develop into a female. And when they develop at cooler temperatures, they develop into a male. And at temperatures in between, you'll get a 50-50 ratio or something, males to females on that. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about with this bearded dragon, depending on what temperature the eggs incubate at, regardless of what your genes may say, you will develop into the sex that egg incubated at, colder or warmer. And that's how it's driving it. Okay, this would be if I was running a workshop, this would be a workshop of how do you explain this instead of just saying nature's driving it. Nature's driving it. How would you explain this from an engineering perspective? How might you explain this from an engineering perspective? This egg, it incubated at a higher temperature and it developed into a female. How could you explain that from an engineering perspective? Is it magic? It's like a hybrid. Okay, good. So you're perfect. You're immediately into the engineering realm. That's a good explanation. Hybrid cars can run off battery, they can run off the engine, or you can run engine and batteries at the same time. So what you're saying is some engineer with foresight said, I want this car to be able to go in multiple modes, therefore I will give it the ability to go into multiple modes. Bingo. Our great creator said, I want these turtles sometimes to develop into females, sometimes to develop into males, and sometimes to develop into both. So good. There's foresight. The engineer said, I wanted to do this. There. Okay, you're on the hot seat. What must be on the egg? There's got to be something on the egg that tells you what temperature you're cooking at, and that would be a temperature what? Sensor. Okay, so now we're thinking about this from an engineering perspective. Now we got this egg, and I hypothesize that the Lord Jesus made it be able to go this way or this way, and therefore I'm going to look on the egg and see if there's a temperature what? Sensor. Guess what? When you look on the egg, they're there. There's temperature sensors right on the egg on that. So it's not just enough to have a temperature sensor on these eggs. Now this egg detects that it's incubating here. It's incubating here. And the sensor sends data inside the egg to the nucleus. What do you think is in the nucleus? There's got to be some kind of logic. If my sensor says I'm incubating here, then do what with my development? Then switch my development to go down the female track. Switch it all to do that and execute it so it does it. And that's exactly what you find. That's how it does. That's how it works. It's not magic. It's just that the Lord said, and I don't know what his rationale is, I know it's going to be good, that when there's these temperatures, I want them to be females. When there's these, I want them to be males. And when they're here, I want them to be mixed. And there's got to be some rationale why he's doing that for there. But from an engineering perspective, I'm looking for the elements that should be there if it's going to do that. But in this case, they don't see that. All they see is it's the temperature which is determining everything. You know what the temperature is? It is what it is, what it is. The temperature isn't running anything. The temperature just what? Is. It just is. What's running everything is the sensor, the logic, the ability to change your sex or direct the sex. That's what's running everything, not the sand temperature. Does this make sense? They can't see it. They don't see it. All they see is the temperature. They see the temperature. They see the environment. The environment drives it. We see the environment as just is what it is on that. So they see something like this hot, burned out wasteland like Texas or something like that. And they see that causing small, little, short-haired dogs on that. They see that this hot environment drives dogs to do that on there. We would say, no, the exact opposite. Dogs can detect what's happening and they adapt. They adapt themselves. And I'll bet you'll find temperature sensors on the dogs there. So the end of this talk today, change your thinking. Change your thinking by getting rid of outdated, mistaken, mystical, and misleading thinking. And you have to replace it. Replace it. And the only way to break a bad habit is to replace it with a better habit. And none other than the wise Jack Nicholson said that. I mean, who can't take advice from Jack Nicholson on there? I mean, you better, or he'll be after you on those things. All right, that's where we leave off today. Tomorrow we will pick up with doing biology as if Darwin hadn't been born. All of this stuff is out. What's out? Randomness. What's out? Passivity. And what's out? The personification of nature. Personification's out, passivity's out, and all the randomness, the purposelessness is out. All right? Turn it back over to Dr. Nicholas.